Good morning and welcome to Exploration. I'm Randy Davis, and our guest this week is Dr. Wade Gilley, who is the Governor's Secretary of Education. Dr. Gilley, thank you for joining us for the program today.
Thank you, Randy. I'm glad to be here.
Good to have you with us. Can we start out just by giving our listeners a basic overview of the Secretary's office? What, as defined by law and your responsibilities reporting to the Governor, what are your duties and powers of the Office of the Secretary of Education in the state?
Well, the duties and powers as defined by law and by the Hopkins Commission on Governmental Management and by the authority delegated to the Office of the Secretary of Education by the Governor includes a number of things. First, and perhaps most important, it includes the administration of the budget. In Virginia, the Governor has very broad powers related to the budget and budget administration, and many policies and major impact on the operation of state government can be felt through the administration of the budget. And the Governor has delegated to me, as he has all the other secretaries, his authority and responsibility in relationship to the administration of the budget. Of course, this doesn't mean that we can just run wild. We certainly coordinate and work very closely with the Governor in the administration of the budget. But in the area of education, our budget is approximately $2.5 billion in the state, and it covers 39 institutions of higher education, the aid to public schools, the State Department of Education, schools for the deaf and the blind, and a variety of other agencies and institutions all across the Commonwealth. A second area is the coordination of policy. And this is particularly important in the area of education because we have in Virginia a concept of lay control of education, which gives a lot of power to the local school boards, the State Board of Education, and the boards of visitors of our schools for the deaf and the blind and institutions of higher education. In many cases, these agencies and institutions conflict. They're trying to do the same thing, and they're being promoted and authorized to do the same thing by a lay board responsible only for one institution or one agency or a group of institutions and agencies. And it's the role of the Secretary, in my case, the Secretary of Education, to resolve conflicts and to develop policy which will lead to better coordination and more effective expenditure of state funds. For example, the State Board of Education is the body that certifies public school teachers, yet the institutions for higher education are the ones who train school teachers. So there's, in addition, the community colleges and others offer courses for recertification. So there, on one hand, the Board of Education has responsibility for saying who can be certified for a teacher, and yet there are cases in which these powers conflict, which the institutions of higher education may want to do something different from what the Board of Education. And of course, in this particular case, the Board of Education does have the ultimate authority, yet there's need for coordination. In the area of vocational education, we have adult and continuing vocational education in our public schools, our vocational technical centers across the state under the local school boards. We have a very broad and very good vocational education program for adults in our community colleges, and in some cases our senior institutions offer vocational technical programs. So one of the areas in which I work is to try to resolve conflicts, try to promote efficiency and cooperation between all these agencies so that the public will be best served for the funds that they invest. Well, that is just a thumbnail sketch, and there are a number of other areas in which I operate, everything from small special projects of the Governor to things like negotiating and overseeing the implementation of the college desegregation plan with HEW. So there's a variety of things to do and quite a bit of work in this office, as there is in other secretarial areas.
Again, in the way of preliminaries, can you give us another thumbnail sketch of your background and qualifications? When you decided when you were 8 years old that you wanted to be Secretary of Education?
Well, actually, I never thought I'd be in education until I was out of college for quite a while. I graduated from VPI in 1961 as a civil engineer and worked as a civil engineer. And actually worked up into the executive management of a pretty large corporation very shortly after getting out. And I earned a PhD in civil engineering from Virginia Tech, and I've been to the Harvard Business School and taken education courses at VPI, the University of Florida, and the University of Virginia. So I have that educational background. I've served on the faculty at VPI. I've been president of 2 community colleges in Virginia and 1 4-year senior institution in West Virginia. So I have about 15 years of higher education administration and teaching since I graduated from college in 1961.
You've been in this office since January of '78.
That's right, yes.
In that time, what issue or problem or concern do you think has taken up most of your time as far as running the office of Secretary of Education?
Well, of course, we have the routine day-to-day things, but I think the 3 major things that have taken most of my time involved the HEW plan. The first 6 or 8 months I was on the job, really about the first 12 months, a good portion of my time was taken up with trying to resolve a number of our problems with HEW related to the college desegregation and the final approval of a plan for Virginia. This took a lot of time and was very difficult. It seems to be going very well now. The second major area has been the implementation of programmed budgeting, which has been a 1.5-year process at this point and will go through January 1978, in which we are attempting to budget based on actual programs and the evaluation of those programs rather than just incremental, adding some money on to whatever someone got last year. We really go back to base 0 in each program and determine whether or not this program is a viable program based on evaluation, what kind of priority it has in the state. And so that's it's been a sort of a trial and error process because in my area with more than 50 agencies and institutions, I have some difficulty getting all of them working together and the communications, but we've been a trial and error, and it seems to be working, be improving as we go along. So program budgeting and implementing in state government has been a big task. I guess most recently we've had the 2 things which have taken up a great deal of my time. It's the unfortunate publicity and problems related to our very fine community colleges. And then, of course, since Dr. Campbell retired as State Superintendent of Public Instruction, I've been acting State Superintendent in that capacity and will be until August 1, when Dr. John Davis takes over as Superintendent of Public Instruction. So I guess those are 4 of the major things that I've dealt with in the 1.5 years, other than the routine business of the office.
Okay, let's talk more specifically about some of those things you mentioned. The HEW plan, just something that struck me. Do you think there will be any changes in the relationship between Virginia and the Health, Education, and Welfare Department now there's been a change of leadership? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, we've been concerned about that because even though we had strong disagreements with Mr. Califano on some of his policies and ideas, at least we knew where we stood with him. I'm not sure that Mrs. Harris, the new Secretary of HEW, will have any policies very different from Mr. Califano. However, if there's wholesale shakeup within HEW, the Office of Civil Rights, I think it could have some adverse impact on our negotiations and implementation of this plan. One of the problems that Virginia has faced over the years has been the continuing change in the cast of characters in the Office of Civil Rights. We have one group that wants one thing and they're out and gone, and a new group comes in and they have a whole different attitude toward college desegregation and the problems related to higher education, and then they're gone, another one comes in, and we're very hopeful that even though the Secretary has changed, that many of the officers and directors within HEW, because certainly that needs stability. For example, the U.S. Office of Education, in its first 100 years of existence, only had 11 U.S. Commissioners of Education. In the last 12 years, they've had 11 commissioners. So the first 100 years of the office, they had the average tenure of the commissioner was 10 years. In the last 12 years, the average tenure of the commissioner is slightly over 1 year. So that has created a lot of instability and uncertainty on our part out in the field, not only in Virginia but across the nation, as to what's going to happen next. And it causes you to want to sit back and wait and see what they're going to do rather than acting in a positive manner.
Virginia seems to have stood at loggerhead with the HEW department for a long time in meeting racial quotas, as some would call them, satisfying the guidelines and the directives of the department until the governor and yourself submitted a plan which I understand they found acceptable, which involves Norfolk State University and Old Dominion is merging some programs, cutting some programs, and studying that now. Looking back on it, and the problems we've had in the past with HEW, do you think things are pretty well solved? Do you think that the problems that have cropped up between the state and the federal government on that level can die down now and rest? Are they satisfied? Will there be any problems as significant as this in the future?
Well, the current plan that we have in operation is approved through 1982, and I'd say that we'd be very fortunate to be able to achieve all the goals of that plan by 1982. Therefore, more than likely we'll have to have another plan negotiated at that time. So I'd say our problems with HEW are not over. And I suspect that not only in this area but in many others it'll never be over, because they're pouring huge sums of money into education, channeled through the states and in some cases to the institutions in other cases. And power follows money, and the more money they put in, the more power they're going to want to exercise. And as a result, the struggle for who controls the schools will continue. And not only here in Virginia but all across the nation.
Is there too much, in your opinion, federal meddling with the state schools?
I think that unfortunately that two things have happened at the federal level. One, that the U.S. Office of Education, I guess perhaps soon to be the U.S. Department of Education, has become more of a conduit for the flow of funds to school on one hand, and on the other hand they've tried to have more and more input into the curriculum and operations of the schools, holding the threat of cutoff of funds over the heads of the schools and the state. I think that's unfortunate, and it's a trend which seems to be continuing. I believe that the U.S. Office of Education would better serve United States education if it could become a national resource. Back in the 40s and 50s, U.S. Office of Education did. They had a lot of experts in areas, and they were able to send these experts out to the school divisions, to the states, to help them anticipate problems coming up and to develop solutions to those problems. Unfortunately, now the emphasis seems to be on channeling money to the states and then using that money to control the curriculum, rather than helping the school divisions, wherever they are, meet the issues and problems of today or tomorrow.
So it could loosely be compared to a bribery situation?
Well, it's not a bribery situation. It becomes almost a life or death. Someone gives you money, you become on a regular basis an allowance, so to speak, to help you meet your expenses. And then they start saying, well, we're going to cut your allowance off, or if you don't start coming in early on Saturday night. I don't think it's a bribery. It's just it's an exercise in power, and money being related to power.
Second topic you mentioned is taking up a lot of your time. I will agree, has been in the press an awful lot and got a lot of publicity. Be that right or not, I'm not sure, but is the situation with the community colleges. Basic background, community college audits revealed some alleged improprieties among the chancellor, the way the system has been run. You and Secretary Walker met with the board, I believe it was a couple of months ago, expressed your concerns, the governor's concerns. They subsequently took action, through a lot of changes, probably the most prominent of which was the removal of the chancellor for a one-year period, replacing him with the Dr. Ernst of Northern Virginia Community College, interim chancellor. You seemed concerned at the meeting you had with the board a couple of months ago. Are you still concerned? Have your concerns been eased somewhat by the action of the board?
Well, first I would say that we have the community college system in Virginia is a unique and needed and very fine system of community-based colleges, which is vital really to the total educational program in the Commonwealth, and most of them do a very fine job. Our concern from my office, and I think from Secretary Walker's, has been the lack of policy direction to the colleges from the state board. And we've asked them on a number of occasions to address policy issues, everything from a uniform student loan collection policy, so that the colleges will be doing things uniformly and the students know what's going to happen and how they should repay their funds, and what's going to happen if they don't repay the loans. Variety of issues like that, policy issues that the board has for some reason been unable to address itself to. And it seemed to us that there were more and more of these issues piling up, and we were very concerned about that. I think that the board has now addressed a number of these issues. They've decided to meet on a more regular basis so that they can be approving things ahead of time. They can be planning. The board has decided to the internal auditors will report to the board, and the board will be aware of all these audits as they're made, and we'll have an opportunity to follow up and see if the presidents and the colleges. I think that's very good because it catches small problems, nips them in the bud, and we don't have a crisis like we've had in the last 2 or 3 months. The Chancellor Ernst, who's in the office for 1 year, has put forth a very thorough and needed reorganization of the system's offices to put them more in a management position rather than. I think the colleges were probably over-administered and under-managed, and Ernst is moving to correct that. The board has laid out a number of things that they plan to do during this year. If they can accomplish those and address the policy issues in the process, I think that that it'll all be to the benefit of the very fine community colleges that we have, and we can ensure that not only are they preserved but are strengthened in the years ahead.
What is your feeling about the whole situation as far as the media is concerned? Did the media blow the thing out of proportion? I get the feeling from some officials that they were paying more attention to it, or we were paying more attention to it than was really necessary.
Well, I don't think that's necessarily true. I think that perhaps that those 15 audits were overemphasized in the media and perhaps elsewhere. I don't want to imply that the things that were in the audits were not serious, but I do think that there were things that could be corrected, that I'm confident that the board and the colleges were moving to correct them. So I think that perhaps too much emphasis was given to that. However, I think that there was certainly a crisis there. It affected a major educational system in Virginia, and it was a public interest, and I think it's entirely possible that the media might have played a prominent role in a reform, in a change of attitude, and a moving in a different direction.
Talk about some of the issues on a more philosophical note, your feelings in the department, and what you've seen being here in your capacity as secretary. I think who we're talking to this morning are the average citizens, the average Virginians, the people, when you mention the word education, the main thing they're concerned about is their son or daughter getting an adequate preparation for living in the outside world after they graduate from high school or college. On a philosophical note, if you would, what kind of education does Virginia offer, either as compared to the kind it offered in the past or compared to other states or any basis you'd like, or how do you feel?
Well, I think that in the late 50s and early 60s, we saw quite a transformation in education all across the country and in Virginia. Many of the things that we saw happening were very good, and many were not. Social promotion, the lack of emphasis on basics and adoption was education now for continuing to improve our educational system, and I think that we will. I think that in this regard, with the constitutional commitment, with the standards of quality, Virginia is a leader in terms of this thrust. I think that we have yet to see the benefit of this, because we just now have the first group of first, second, and third graders who have come through the basic skills program. We saw an upturn in the average test scores in our fourth graders who took the test this year statewide, a tremendous improvement. And I think that we'll see this continued improvement in the performance of our children throughout the next several years, and all of it will be tied to this commitment on the part of the Commonwealth and these minimum standards for quality, which are being enforced in every one of the 141 school districts, school divisions throughout the Commonwealth. So I think we've made great progress. My children have been in a variety of Virginia public schools for a long time, and I have one in the 8th grade this coming year and one in the 3rd grade, and I think our public schools are good. Public schools really only as good as the teachers and the principals and the parents and the students want them to be, but I think with the funding and the standards of quality, with the emphasis on accountability not only for our teachers but for our principals and administrators, and the attempts to involve parents and in the educational process, all will strengthen our public school systems, and I'm very proud of it. I think a lot of work has gone into it. A lot of people have devoted many years to improving the system, and I think we got a little bit off track in the 1960s with some ideas that just didn't work out, but I think we're getting back on track now, and I'm confident that we're going to see steady improvement in the years ahead.
Maybe referring to that getting off track in the 60s, but there's been a recent movement to get back to the basics, to reading, writing, and arithmetic. What happened? Why did we get off the basics? Do you have a feeling from that?
Well, I don't know. I think that we went through a period of ever increasing enrollments, and teachers were pushed hard. I think we saw a great influx of federal money, which was not necessarily to the benefit of the students, because with that, in many cases, because with that money came people with ideas to sell. Your textbook people, your media and equipment people, your testing people. It came to control the curriculum rather than the teachers and the parents and the school boards. They had more influence on the curriculum. The colleges of education grew and produced more teachers. As a result, they had professors, and these professors and research and writing and promoting ideas brought in a lot of newfangled ideas, like that education should be fun, so that you try to take out anything that's repetitious or rote learning or where you have to memorize. So you take all the discipline. The end result was to take all the discipline out of education. We had open classrooms and a variety of other concepts just didn't work out. And I think the public realized it, and their realization has been expressed through the laws and standards passed by the General Assembly and the Board of Education, and we're getting back on track.
What is the Secretary's relationship with the General Assembly, working for, not speaking just of politics, working for a Republican governor and a Democratic Assembly, but also of ideals? You haven't been in the office that long. You find the programs, the ideas you have that are brought before the Assembly are accepted fairly, are given a good chance? Is it easy to work with the Assembly people across the street?
Oh, I found it very easy to work for them. I found that the two appropriations committees of the General Assembly, with which I work a great deal, the House Appropriations Committee and the Senate Finance Committee, are both sincerely interested in education, yet they're both very responsible and fiscally conservative committees, insistent upon spending the taxpayers' money in a very efficient and effective way. And those basic concepts I'm in agreement with 100%. So I've had a very good working relationship with the two finance committees. The two education committees, the Senate Health and Education Committee and the House Education Committee, both of those committees have a long history of interest in, and they are the major education policy committees of the General Assembly. We have had some disagreement on educational philosophy, but I've had during the two sessions of the General Assembly that met while I've been in office, I've had very good working relationships with them. Actually, those of us in the cabinet or in the executive agency head appointments really have a role to play as professional managers rather than, I don't think anyone is in any of these jobs because of politics. I think that Virginia's governors have always realized that the best way to make a good record as governor and thus get reelected or help your party elect someone is to do a good job. And I think that's the emphasis that Governor Dalton made in his appointments, and he reappointed a large number, a high percentage of the people who were here before. But I think the General Assembly, through the efforts of the Hopkins Commission and others to put more emphasis on management and state government, realize this too. And I think they accept the cabinet officers and the department executive agency heads as professional managers. Occasionally we have disagreements on policy, but in the end result, the General Assembly is the one that sets the policy. We can disagree with them, but once the law is passed, it's our duty, sworn obligation to carry it out, and we do that. So I think my relationship has been very good. Of course, I haven't been in Virginia and been administrator and a president of a college on and off for 10 or 12 years. I've known a lot of members of the General Assembly. I have a half a dozen classmates over there, people who graduated from college with me, a couple, 3 senators, and so I get along real well with them. So I've had a very good working relationship with the members of the General Assembly, and of course we understand that they are the final authority in terms of Virginia law. And
final question, one of my favorite final questions, one that I hope no one ever asks me. I'll ask you anyway. When you retire, when you leave this post and look back on it, what do you hope will be the outstanding accomplishment, the goal, thing that you've accomplished that you'd like to brag about, hopefully? Has that already been accomplished, or do you hope to?
Well, I don't know. I've left, been in several jobs and have left them, and all of them I've looked back and have seen a number of things that I could have done better and probably should have done differently. However, in each case I've been able to look back and say, at the time that I worked as hard as I could, I did my best, even though in some cases it wasn't good enough, but I have the clear conscience of knowing that I worked and did my best. Now, as far as this job is concerned, I'm just now, it takes about a year or 18 months to get a good grasp of any job, to get to know the people and this, what the issues and problems are. But I think that what I hope to contribute to this position and to the Commonwealth during the period is to better define the office of the Secretary of Education. It's only been in existence since 1972 with as a result of the Zimmer Commission on State Governmental Management. The laws that define the powers of the office of the Secretary of Education have only been in existence in the last 2 or 3 years as a result of laws implemented by the General Assembly on recommendation of the Hopkins Commission, Governmental Management. So this position and the office itself and the impact that it can have on the management of Virginia's educational system to provide for the efficient and effective use of tax dollars is an evolving one. And I think that I can, because of my experience in Virginia education, and I knew how the General Assembly operated when I came here, I know how the state government operates, having been president of 2 Virginia colleges for 9 years. So I knew how it was operating, the state government did, and I think that I can contribute to the the growth and development and efficiency and effectiveness of Virginia's government by defining the office of the Secretary of Education, and to make it an important force and factor in a well-managed state government.
Well, we appreciate you taking time to explain a little bit more about it to us and our listeners, and thank you for taking the time to be with us on the program this morning.
Well, very glad to be anytime.
We've been talking with Dr. Wade Gilley, who's the Secretary of Education, the Governor's Office candidate, this morning on Exploration. Join us again next week. I'm Randy Davis, WLEE News.
Business by retrofitting or tacking on some small pieces of equipment. So the Gasohol movement, which has not been funded, it's been largely individuals coming and talking, in public forums like this, have had to fall back and go to what is out there. I think the biggest breakthrough that we see in the Gasohol movement is the commitment by Archer Daniels Midland in the Midwest to produce solely motor fuel alcohol, and the commitment by Publicker Industries in Philadelphia to open up what was or is the world's largest fermentation distillery. But that plant has been closed for 5 years because the liquor industry made it such that it was not competitive. However, to go into the motor fuel business, to open up massive amounts of production and jobs and economy for Philadelphia, which is my hometown, I'm flabbergasted that it is happening. I hope that it happens in Reston, Virginia, and I hope that it happens with the Kentucky bourbon plants. And then, when we sit down to do it the right way, which is just take the technology that's out there today and build one, in 18 months, you're going to have an efficient operation, both in terms of energy and in terms of cost.
One final question. In your experience in marketing Gasohol, are the private investors interested in investing money in this area from your standpoint?
I have a privately held corporation. Myself and my partner put together some amounts of money to get started. If we were selling stock, we would have issued a tremendous amount by now. The private sector is not radically different than the industrial sector or the private business sector. Basically, there's a chicken or the egg problem. Which comes first, the retailing of it or the production of it? For a company like Smith Bowman to make the decision to actually produce, it's going to cost them front money to get that online. They have to see a market. So by coming to Virginia and opening up here, we've shown that there is a market on the East Coast that is not just the Midwestern farmer, the Iowa corn producer buying his own product, that the market exists. And right now, many stock brokerage houses, many financial institutions are changing their tunes. There were many amounts of negative publicity put out by the major oil companies for years, saying that there was a negative energy balance, saying that you were taking food. And these arguments have been overcome such that the investing community is now looking at it in a different light, a much more objective and profit-oriented light. And I don't see a better industry for investment than alternative liquid motor fuel. I mean, you couldn't have a higher demand curve.
So. Any other questions? Andy Guest has arrived, the other member of the committee, and good to have you.
Thank you very much.
The questions you can.
Chairman, I'm Walter McFarland, Deputy Attorney General. While Mo is still in the stand, I'd like to speak a little something about the question on the production of alcohol through wood. At the meeting that Mo and I attended along with several other people from Virginia, that turnaround time on production through wood, they have a hybrid popular tree, which they're using in Pennsylvania. It has a turnaround time of 5 years from the time it's planted. And it's a very simple thing. They do not have to replant it. They cut it off about a foot above the ground, and it springs from that stump and regrows in another 5-year period. They're ready to harvest it. And they're looking at it now in Pennsylvania for the purposes of aiding in taking care of the reclamation of strip mining operations up there.
Yes.
The main difficulty with harvesting wood and everything is that we don't have any loggers in this country anymore, because some of the wood operations have been stopped, and most of the land which is not managed in Pennsylvania and Virginia is not managed because we have nobody to work the land.
Would you identify yourself, please, for us, Steve?
My name is Otto Saley from Petersburg.
Well,
Thank you.
that's basically our point. Let's put people into work in America. Let's put loggers back in there, producing our motor fuel instead of giving it to the OPEC sheiks.
Any other comments or questions? Could we go ahead and give you a chance to speak in a few minutes? If you have-
Something else, so I wondered if I could ask.
Okay, just briefly, okay?
For some strange reason, sir, I
Yes,
was
ma'am.
entranced with your presentation and astonished that your behavior science illiteracy.
Well, yes, ma'am. I'm sorry I didn't study it, so I would like to correct it.
We have sociologically a 50 to 100-year time lag in real change for valid innovations.
I'd be more than happy to let you speak later on
I'm
that.
going to speak later.
On the time lag,
If I could, please,
Yeah.
No matter how valid your ideas are or how much you people want to have Gasohol committee, you're just not going to make it in time. Unless you have a number at the town meeting on the air where everyone in Virginia for 1 hour will be listening. Otherwise, you've got a 50 to 100-year time lag.
ma'am, you don't have a 50 or 100-year time lag between now and the next war. And that will keep
I'm sorry,
people...
we don't need a conversation between two persons here.
Excuse me.
I was asking, are you
Would you
aware what happened
please,
to solar energy? That's what's going to happen to Gasohol. I'm terribly sorry. But I'm...
Would you please wait until your turn to speak?
I
Thank
wonder
you.
if there's any use of my waiting. I'm the ombudsman for the nation, for Gasohol.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
This time, I would call on Commissioner Carbaugh from the Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services.
Thank you very much, Mr. Davis. Members of the committee, good to see all of you again. I trust you've had a nice holiday since the General Assembly adjourned, but looks like you're one holiday, huh? I want to talk to you about, just very briefly and quickly as I can, agriculture, because agriculture is Virginia's renewable resource. And as it relates to the Gasohol question, I think that agriculture probably has as much or more at stake in this than any other sector, although it does affect everybody. But agriculture is the area from which you're going to get, agriculture and forestry, you're going to get most of the raw materials to produce this Gasohol. And perhaps our slogan ought to be, instead of putting a tiger in your tank, is putting some corn in your tank. We, as a department, fully support the concept of fermentation of agricultural products for the production of ethanol to be used for motor vehicle fuel purposes. Currently, Gasohol, we also have responsibility for the motor fuel law in the state, and currently Gasohol is a legal commodity, as you've already heard, under the Virginia Motor Fuels Law, and registered by several retailers in eastern and northern Virginia. Through the first week of June, slightly more than 250,000 gallons of Gasohol have been sold in the Northern Virginia area. During the past several months, we have received a number of inquiries from people in the agricultural community, as well as other industries who have expressed an interest in the use of corn and other agricultural crops to produce alcohol for making Gasohol. This interest extends from possible large investments, much $15, $20 million, to construct large plants to produce alcohol on a commercial basis, to a small cooperative plant which could produce fuel for the co-op's own use and provide surplus which would be marketed on a local basis. The production of alcohol may well create new demands for Virginia grain and has the potential for the production and use of other agricultural products. It should be noted that sweet potatoes and white potatoes offer perhaps the greatest potential of any agricultural Virginia-produced farm commodity. New production marketing potentials and further development of Virginia agriculture is a primary objective, of course, of our agency, as it is, I know, of your committee and others. Most of the people with whom we have met recognize there are numerous challenges developing this alternate source of fuel. Fluctuation in grain supplies and prices could be a problem for alcohol distillers. However, our federal government's grain reserve policy can, to some extent, accommodate grain production for fuels by providing a measure of year-to-year stabilization of grain feedstock supplies and cost. And that's according to the Deputy Secretary of Agriculture, Jim Williams. Certainly, we must begin to look for renewable sources of fuel to keep our vehicles and machinery operating in the years to come. Our agency has been designated by the Secretary of Commerce and Resources to gather information and data on alcohol and provide whatever assistance we can to those in agricultural production and others who are interested in pursuing and developing this source of fuel. It is important to consider all aspects of the potential for alcohol production and to make sure that we do not make changes in agricultural policy that might prove counterproductive to farm producers or other segments of the economy. According to the Agricultural Stabilization and Conservation Office in Richmond, that's the federal agency that has to do with all of the grain set-aside program, 34% of Virginia's farmers signed up for participation in the federal set-aside program. This means that approximately 87,000 acres designated for the production of corn, wheat, barley, and sorghum were to be taken out of production for the year 1979. This office estimated that after planting, approximately 60,000 acres will be confirmed in this program. This acreage has the potential, based on 85 bushels per acre, to produce 5,100,000 bushels of corn. And at the conversion rate of 2.5 gallons of alcohol per bushel, this yield would be approximately 12.75 million gallons. Virginia sold 2.8 billion gallons of gasoline in 1978. A little over that, but approximately 2.8. It is estimated that by 1981, approximately 1/2 of all the gasoline sold will be unleaded. It'll be about 1.4 billion gallons. Therefore, we would need approximately 140 million gallons of alcohol to market all unleaded gasoline as Gasohol. That gives you some idea of the magnitude, I think, of the potential. It would appear, taking into account the potential alcohol available from outside the state and crops other than grain, such as white potatoes and sweet potatoes, there would be sufficient raw material available without seriously affecting other agricultural markets for these products. With regard to the outside sources of alcohol, we understand that the Archer Daniels Midlands Company, which of course is a large grain company as well as other types of products and one of the largest producers of alcohol, has increased their production from 10,000 gallons per day to 100,000 gallons per day. And by December, they expect to be producing 200,000 gallons per day. They have recently increased their price from $1.49 per gallon, FOB, to $1.50 per gallon. However, they indicate they are having no problems meeting the demand and currently have a large inventory on hand. We do believe there is some potential for on-farm production of alcohol. We believe also that it would be appropriate that a portion or all of the state tax on Gasohol be waived for a period of 5 years as an incentive for the production of Gasohol. Further, we would point out there is a potential for some funding through our Agricultural Foundation Fund for a small pilot on-farm plant which would serve as a model. Such an application, of course, would have to be submitted in writing detailing the proposed project and would require the support of some commodity group such as the Virginia Corn Growers Association, and of course must be acted on by that foundation, Paul. No assurance that they would approve it, but at least that's a possibility. One other point that I would like to make concerning some observation meeting groups, and then I'm finished. In discussing this with a number of interests, and information which we've been able to obtain on gasohol production, we believe there is a need to establish on a state basis some form of task force or a technical assessment team made up of experts in the various disciplines that would be required to very thoroughly evaluate the matter of gasohol production. To do two things really, in order to identify the problems, and surely there are going to be some from an economic standpoint and otherwise, and to see whether those problems can be solved, and to see what alternatives there might be.